Hello, can everyone hear me? Welcome. I'm trying to show you welcome everyone. We're launching the 30th issue of Catamaran here today. And it's nice doing it virtually because we can have people from all over the world. Actually, we have a reader from Australia. And so yeah, we have 12 contributors to or 13 contributors to the new issue that will be joining us from various cities all around to share a little bit of their writing, their poetry, and you'll get to hear them live in their own voice. So it's going to be a little bit like a literary TV show tonight. You can freely chat on the sidebar there with all your friends that are here, but we can't hear you or see you, so there won't be any audio or video interference. But you can chat throughout. So if you want to comment on the reading, the presenters will be able to see your comments. And there's also a little buy the issue button. And you can click that and get a copy of Catamaran, the new issue. I love this cover. This is by David Laguerre. He's a California classicist painter that lives here in Big Sur. And he's been painting for over 30 years, the local landscapes. And so I just thought it was lovely. He's been in Catamaran a few times to have this sort of, I think it's emotional hope, it feels like to me in these times. And so here we are. We've made it through now a pandemic, some wildfires where we had to get ready to evacuate our offices lately, and just a number of challenges just to keep bringing you the magazine. But it's a labor of love, and we've been managing to do it. And I just want to thank so many people that have helped us. I want to give a little shout out to our editorial assistants and interns, and they've been really making our presence online because that's the only way we can really reach people. So I want to thank Milena, McCabe, Katie Shiver, and Sam Simmons for all their work to keep us alive online. And I want to thank our editorial assistants who've been all working from home, and that's Carol Ricard, Mary Roche, and Matthew Simmons. And I want to also give a shout out to our board of directors because every member of the board made a special donation this spring to help keep us alive. So Neil Coonerty, Diane Craddock, Albert Everett, Elizabeth Gummery, Dan Hafley, David Kahn, Andre Lafleur, and Rachel Wadeen all contributed this spring extra donations to keep us going. So thank you, everyone. And so without further ado, I'm going to get it started. And how we're doing this is we're bringing people to the screen in groups of threes. So we will introduce three people, they'll read, and then we'll bring in the next three. And so our first reader tonight is going to be Zocimo. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Zocimo Rios. Zocimo Rios lives in the hills of the Mojave Desert and is a high roller in the surrounding bingo community. His current project is a book-length series of poems about the state of faith in America. This is his first publication, so please welcome Zocimo Rios.
Thank you, Catherine. For those of you who have your Catamaran in front of you, you can find my prose poem on page 80. It's titled High Desert Hillbillies. My dad moved us to the hills above the high desert. We have a mile-long dirt road. Every time it rains, the water takes some of my road and leaves it somewhere else. So much for the kindness of nature. Late at night, I can hear my Great Pyrenees arguing back and forth with the coyotes smelling out the goats. The owl that perches itself in the trees outside my window would fly away with a goat if it could, but instead it flew off with my chihuahua. In the winter, the weather keeps the lizards and rattlesnakes in hibernation, but once it heats up, they will be trying to sneak into the house. If the snakes could erect themselves and stand on the tips of their rattlers, they would see the entire valley from the kitchen window. Looking back at them late at night are the blinking red eyes of the windmills. My binoculars let me see when pilots leave the keys in the plane's ignition at Northrop Grumman. I use the same binoculars to look down my hill and catch people dumping their trash or having sex. What I wasn't able to catch was my car when I forgot to apply the parking brake. It rolled past the guineas, went clear through the fence, and landed on a mound of creosote. Gravity is nature too, I suppose. And before I hand it back to Catherine, I want to say thank you to my fairy god gringo. His name is Charles Hood, and he's also featured in this issue of Catamaran. You can find his essay titled Audubon's Tiny Houses on page 61. And thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Zocimo. That was really great. Our next reader is Annie Penfield. Annie received her MFA in writing from Vermont College of Fine Arts. Her work has appeared in Fourth Genre, Hunger Mountain, RKVRY, Equestrian Quarterly, Assay, and River Teats Beautiful Soul. She's working on a narrative based on her essay, The Half-Life, winner of Fourth Genre's Steinberg Essay Prize, and named a notable essay in the American Essays.
Ready?
Please welcome Annie Penfield.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to have my essay in this beautiful issue of the Catamaran Literary Reader, and the art that accompanies my piece is just stunning. And it's great to be here tonight reading to you. So I'm going to read two different sections from my essay, Mercy. What you need to know is that the narrator is 18 and is in Australia, and I won't be reading with an Australian accent. I'll leave that for Simon's reading at the end. Mercy. We really should do something about that lamb. I think he's starving. I point at a broken-legged lamb tied to the side of the shearing shed as Michael and I walk towards the horse pen. Piteously bleeding, he hops around. He's eaten the grass short as far as he can reach, his whole world on a tether. I want to save him. Michael pulls out a knife I didn't know he carried. He grips the fleece on the crown of the lamb's head, stretching to expose the long neck, and slices his throat. Blood spurts from the slit, but Michael doesn't get a drop on himself. I marvel at the trajectory of the blood, at the precise direction, yet my step falters. Yesterday, after only a week of working here at the Boko Pastoral Company in New South Wales, I rode with Michael across this station and gathered sheep. Here, I'm a long way from my Massachusetts home, my Yankee heritage and Mayflower roots. 3 months ago, I was exercising the English thoroughbreds for the master of the fox hunt. Yesterday, I galloped recklessly as a girl on a horse, mustering sheep. I worked with the station owner's 19-year-old son, Michael, to a common goal, and I felt a certain authority. But today, I'm again a stranger in a strange land. I look down at the blood stain in the grass around the small lamb, just inches from the toes of my LL Bean boots, wipe my sweaty palms on my Levi's, swallow the burn of nausea that's gurgled up my throat, and glance at Michael as he releases the head of the lamb and it flops to the ground. Michael wipes his blade clean on the grass, folds and returns the knife to his pocket. One less. We leave the dead lamb and continue on to the horse pen. Later, on horseback, we have the puppies along on this muster so they can learn from their elders. Like me, they must learn by doing. Jelly Baby and Ralphie, the pick of the litter, run at the back of the pack, fully confident. The puppies are not very coordinated. They ramble along, yapping at the heels of the sheep. Their bark is bigger than their little legs. Jelly Baby, marked by a scattering of black and white on her limbs and tummy, falls and pops right back up. I see the results of our work. The adults form a collective of 200, then 400. Less obedient lambs break away from the pack, and I don't want to leave them behind. But they're unpredictable in their movements, and I have a hard time judging how wide to circle around them. I have to change their trajectory back to the group. If I'm too far out and give them too much space, they don't move. If I'm too close, I send them straight away, faster. One breaks. I try to circle around, but I fuel his panic. Each time I break wide again, he changes course. He runs into a depression, like a channel that pulls him farther away from the mob. I'm on his heels, scaring him to run faster and straighter. Trapped within the narrow gully, I can't get out of the track I'm on, can't get around in front to make him stop. I've gone a long way for a single lamb, but I'm gaining. When the lamb trips, dives to the ground, and is still. Oh God, I've killed the lamb. Now what? Do I leave him? What's one less lamb? Winded from the ride and the consequence, I stand still on Peppy and catch my breath. Dismounting, I move closer to the lamb. He springs up and runs. For a moment, I'm dumbstruck, but then I let go of Peppy and tackle him. I sling him over Peppy's neck and return to the group. Michael rides up to me and says, "If you wait, they run back to their mothers." He's not pleased. Not even his alluring Australian accent can dull his high-pitched tone of annoyance. I've wasted time and have slowed the progress of the whole group. He's not been able to move the mob without me. I drop the lamb into the group. Michael and I each take a flank to guide them straight, and the dogs linger behind as the locomotive to drive this train. Only Jelly Baby barks. The older dogs have lost interest. We make the slow walk to the yards. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. That was beautiful. What an exciting adventure you had when you were 18 in Australia as a sheep herder. And our next reader is Gabrielle Myers. Gabrielle Myers is a professor of English, a writer, and a chef in Sacramento Valley, California. Her memoir, Hive Mind, details her time on an organic farm run by an activist female farmer. You can access links to her published memoir, poems, essays, and articles, as well as interviews on her YouTube cooking channel and her seasonal recipe blog through her website, GabrielleMyers.com. Her manuscript, Break Self Feed, was a finalist for the 2020 Catamaran Poetry Prize. Please welcome Gabrielle Myers.
Hello. Thank you, Catherine. I'm really excited to be here and to read with you guys. I wish we were in person in San Francisco like we were 2 years ago, but this is a wonderful setup. First, I'd like to read a poem that is published in this issue of Catamaran called After Grass Against Sea by Edward Weston, and it's writing really in response to his photograph. In our minds, we retreat back to the edge, comfort ourselves in end-of-land sadness, rest in the lines of cypress that delineate one field from the next. The hill rise in its crest as it divides this from that, the clear cut before a land rips away from ocean. Grass spears rise against swollen seas. Let us bask in the spear's tips that push and stab into fog-lifted air. Fine points exist. Fine points puncture one realm from another, move in the ocean's pull away from land. Preserve edges, celebrate their distinct boundaries. Let the wind rustle and stop, shake and stop, throttle only to pause and spread. And all these poems are from my unpublished manuscript, Break Self Feed. This next one is called Expansion. While we sleep, tubers root underneath our bed. Our sheets become large limbs arcing into the wood floor. Our arms lengthen into year-old roots that push us against each other, against the mattress. Lupine birth from our eyes, bees emerge from our lips, in our ears crickets sing. Etch still air with an incessant song. The sheets turn into loam. Our feet dip into a small pond fecund with tadpoles, growing into frogs, frogs that with our peeps usher forth spring. Our fingers touch and we fuse into a network of mycelium. Spores launch from our nails, ring in a new version of our evolution. This next poem is called Growth, and I'm not from California, I'm from the East Coast. And what strikes me so much about California is basically it seems like almost everything's dependent on two things, rain or the lack of it, dryness. So this poem was written really at an opposite time than what we're experiencing now with all the fires. This was written in a time where we were just flooded with lots of rain and everything was lush. We almost had so much rain we didn't know what to do with it. It's titled Growth. The rains have been hitting since October. Water comes down hard, penetrates soil dry for too long, makes its way into temporary crevices formed between the grass blades. Puddles rest on roads, sidewalks, lawns, raised beds, roofs, in between paving stones. They reflect ourselves back to ourselves. 3 or was it 4 years of drought? We almost ran out, stopped flushing after peeing, ripped out our lawns. Urine, spilled milk, and beer crusted into our sidewalks, our dying park green spaces. Now our stickiness and smell is out in the Pacific somewhere. The river has taken the trails on its sides, cast our discarded plastic bags into tree limbs, floated beer cans and water coolers to rest on the levee. Whatever we felt about dryness, about our destiny of drought and wanting, we should have held as temporary. Let our old selves, those old memories of feeling in need, wash away, tear from our shallow roots, away and down through the delta, into the bay, out past the Golden Gate, down, away from the Farallons, away from our former self-crusted structures. And the final poem I'm going to read is called Vessels. Curved flesh faces up to the sun, catches what the light gives, reflects brightness and pollen particles back to themselves. Each turn we flare, ignite, spin off luminosity, catch it, hold it, and cast it back. To hold and release, hold, gather energy, release. What energy that's out there is ours, we vessels of light. We turn and turn electrons, churn ourselves through each other towards our own version of wholeness and dispersion. Fill and cast back, spin brightness back upon itself until no more shadow lingers. Everything in us and out, ignited, reborn, like a gift. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
We were going to introduce Phyliss Thompson next, but unfortunately she is not able to attend. I think there's a problem with Wi-Fi and there's some fires where she is in Oregon, I believe. So I'm very sorry if you were here to see Phyliss. But next, Elizabeth McKenzie will be introducing Brad Crenshaw.
Oh, sure. It's a pleasure to introduce Brad Crenshaw. I hope he's here. Brad has authored 5 poetry collections, most recently My Gargantuan Desire. I wonder if I should wait until we see if he's here.
I don't know, can you hear me? There you go.
Oh, great. Okay, here's Brad Crenshaw. He's authored 5 poetry collections, most recently My Gargantuan Desire from Greenhouse River Review Press, and Genealogies also from Greenhouse Review Press. His 5th book, The Memphis Chapters, is due to be published in the fall of 2020. He has published many poems in journals, as well as articles of literary criticism and theory, and 3 articles about neuroscience. He can be found online at Blue Island's Blue as Ink. Please welcome Brad Crenshaw.
Thank you very much. I'd like, of course, to thank the editors and staff at Catamaran for welcoming me into this historic magazine. I'm quite grateful. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from a poem called Inertia Means All Things Are Tending to Endure. It's a celebration of several of my friends. This is the second of the 5 sections in the poem as a whole. From the margins, pretty often in her watercolors, she will introduce a human hand, maybe hers, into her manic surfaces perturbed and blown by antic dangers. Nothing really is at rest except this hectic millisecond she transfixed in pigments. Her tints are gentle, but mislead in ways the frantic birds she paints exploding into flight are never fooled, who flash and fly apart at once to separate nests and perches off at different angles. Everyone escapes to other canvases depicting equal need for vigilance. Lately, she's been finding skeletons embedded in the foreground, formed of stems and leaves, resembling the limbs and architecture of the daily, pre-existing world. She's Catholic in her mercies, and now is needing surgery to fix the wrist and thumb she injured after years of her extended practice. So far, she hasn't given in, but wears a brace that stabilizes her resolve artfully to shield us from the mortal secrets leaking from the background into partial view. The second poem and final poem I'd like to read actually is a poem about the pandemic. It's called Safe Passage. It's in 2 parts. All said, things are settling down. It's that sort of world, definitely haunted, but those who know report that roads are open in Los Angeles where people try to breathe again. And citizens in India can see the Himalayas white as frozen ghosts. It gives me heart somehow. Hindus wave at neighbors, and in Tuscany, the sheltered businessmen are singing on their ledges. Early morning somewhere lately, oilmen wake on ocean platforms without blasting. No spills out of the center of the earth. Almost no one's getting murdered anymore. War, in fact, has been unheard. Military carriers are quarantined. Even winter's mostly over in one hemisphere, where every able hominid is sowing seeds on urban roofs and yards beside an idle truck or two, and fallow fields after a week of storms, all but ovulating for new crops. Everyone I know is living. All this needs to be considered when we come across the latest news, regarding which it may be painful to believe I lied. Terrible trials are not behind us. As in the desert with its dead houses dazzled open in the sun and shadows long and shallow, we unclothe ourselves before the old habitual beauty of our enemies, the intimate touch, a breath of gratitude, or germ of an idea leading willingly into infected company. The love-struck children reach a doddering father with the brutal hand of mercy. Lumbermen in Maine, I've just been told, entirely sold their stock for coffins, whereas locally I have to Zoom a funeral that no one can attend except the one transgendered daughter endless in her box beside my overwhelmed and grieving, unbelieving colleague. Winston Turner at a distance plays trombone. Tannen Williams trumpet. I agree, will fly away. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Brad. Our next reader, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce, is Peter Ferry. Pete Ferry's stories have appeared in McSweeney's, Fiction, OR, Chicago Quarterly Review, Story Quarterly, and Hypertext, among others. He's the winner of an Illinois Arts Council Award for Short Fiction. He's a contributor to the travel pages of the Chicago Tribune and World Hum. He has written 2 novels, Travel Writing, which was published in 2008, and Old Heart, which was published in June 2015, and which won the Chicago Writers Association Novel of the Year Award. His short story, Ike, Sharon, and Me, appeared in the Best American Mystery Stories 2017. He lives in Evanston, Illinois, and Van Buren County, Michigan, with his wife, Carolyn. Please welcome Pete Ferry.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'd like to request, if it's possible, for you to keep Ben Crenshaw's picture up there while I read, because I'd like to look like him. And thank you, I'm very honored to be in this issue of Catamaran. This is a short story called A Primer on Hitchhiking in the 21st Century. Patrick had figured out how to hitchhike in today's world. Had anyone asked him, he would have said, you need a sign, a medium-sized dog that is friendly and cute, and a rest area or truck stop. That's where you practice your craft. If you stand by the side of the road, no one will ever stop for you. Drivers need more than a fleeting glance. They need to see your smile, maybe hear your voice. They need to see that you are good with and kind to animals. Not too small a dog, by the way, because people think they are yappy and inclined to nip. No, a border collie or Australian shepherd is perfect, and not too large a dog, obviously. The real reason for the dog is that no one who is traveling with a friendly dog is going to rob anyone else or do a guy harm. I mean, what would you do with the dog after you took his wallet? And of course, the very first thing he'd tell the cops is the guy had a dog. Now you're going to say 9 out of 10 people, maybe 99 out of 100, won't pick up a guy with a dog. That's all right. All you need is that 1 in 10, that 1 in 100. And do you know how many vehicles pull in and out of a busy truck stop in an hour? So there's your ride. The dog will double, maybe triple your chances. I guarantee it. The truth of the matter was that Patrick usually found his dog in a dog pound at the beginning of his journey and left it off in a dog pound at the end. He always called the dog Scotty because there was something about the sk sound that seemed to perk up any dog's ears. That's how scientific I am being, Patrick said, perhaps a little ruefully, perhaps a bit defensively. His was a quiet, insidious offensive against a world that didn't appreciate or value him enough. Now, the sign tells people a couple of things. First, you're going somewhere, you have a destination, you're not aimless. And second, you can spell, you're not illiterate. Travel with poster board, don't tear up cardboard boxes, and use a magic marker. Of course, no one did ask Patrick his advice on hitchhiking, and no one asked how to poach a box seat at a ball game, or when to draw to an inside straight, or how to sleep in the open, or how to hit a pitch inside out to the opposite field, or any of the many things he wrote these little essays about in his head and practiced aloud without moving his lips while waiting for a ride beside the road. This happened occasionally, despite his best efforts. And it happened the day Fast Eddie picked him up just east of about 80 climbing. The big man was driving an ancient RV that rocked dangerously to one side and then the other when he pulled off the road, so that Patrick had second thoughts about getting into the vehicle even as he was running up to it. Oh boy, he said to himself. But he'd been standing there for almost 2 hours and the sun was already on its way down. He did not want to get stranded in the mountains at night. Still, the first thing Patrick said was, "Thanks, man. If you can just get me to the next rest stop or the truck stop, that would be great." "Thought your sign said Tahoe," said the man. "That's goddamn false advertising." And there was an awkward moment before the guy erupted in a great laugh, the concussion of which Patrick could actually feel in the passenger seat. Then he said feebly, "Well, I just, oh, hell, man, I'm just giving you shit. You get out anywhere you want. Just say the word and I'll pull over." "Fast Eddie," he said, extending his hand. "Well, I'm Patrick. Now, what's your pup's name?" Eddie asked, for the dog was sitting between Patrick's legs in the footwell of the RV. "Scotty. Mine's Scamp." And it was only then that Patrick realized a little hound dog with floppy ears was looking over his shoulder at his dog. Holy shit. "Not to worry, man. Scamp is very copacetic. She's a lover, not a fighter." But it was not Scamp that Patrick was worried about. It was the dog he'd gotten the day before at an animal shelter in Petaluma. He hadn't any idea if that dog was aggressive. Thanks, you guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. What a wonderful story. You guys are going to have to stay in suspense and read the whole thing by getting the magazine.
So I'll go ahead and introduce John. Our next reader is John Struloeff. John is the author of The Man I Was Supposed to Be from Loom Press and has published poems in The Atlantic, Southern Review, Ferry Schooner, Ziziva, PN Review, and elsewhere. He's a former Stegner and NEA Fellow and now directs the creative writing program at Pepperdine University. Please welcome John Struloeff.
Hello, thank you. I'm going to read my poem, The Shadow Waters, from this issue of the magazine. The Shadow Waters. He did not know there would be a break in the railing on that particular corner. He did not know that he would veer his car into that gaping mouth and soar, suddenly weightless, out over the foaming Pacific waves, the battering bodies reaching beneath the surface, only a glassy green fabric between him and these spirits. He hit the water like a wall, and for a moment he was a boat, the sea outside his vessel, a glimpse of the green-black of the deep at the bottom edge of his windows, a strange aquarium view. Then the cold rush of water onto his legs. Somewhere in that soaring descent, beneath the momentary rush of awe and wonder as he passed in low orbit, his churning feelings went from self-pity and heartache and a rage about the difficulties of his life to utter fear. A small animal of panic began leaping, caged in his chest. At that moment, the vessel he was in tilted downward, and he watched the curtain of ocean as it was drawn up his windshield until he was within the shadow waters. It was a serene place of mindlessness, and if it weren't for that leaping animal that seemed to be beating out a message in his chest, what was it saying? He would have followed the weight of his ridiculous life through the shadows and into what may be the peace of death. Instead, he pushed out into the brine, his breath choking him, and swam back up toward the painful, unrelenting light. Thank you.
Wow, that was a beautiful poem. I remember reading that. Thank you so much for that lovely reading. And I wanted to mention that we were planning on featuring Karen Toloui, who lives in Oregon right near the fires. And she has been told she has to most likely evacuate her home. So unfortunately, she's not going to be able to make it, but we will all keep her in our thoughts and prayers, that her home is safe in the fire. We will go back to Elizabeth McKenzie introducing our next reader.
Yes, our next reader is Mark Polizzotti. Hi, Mark.
Elizabeth, hello everyone.
Mark Polizzotti's books include Revolution of the Mind, The Life of André Breton, published by Black Widow Press, and most recently, Sympathy for the Traitor, a translation manifesto from MIT Press. He is currently writing a book about surrealism and preparing a translation of Rimbaud's poems. Please welcome Mark Polizzotti.
Well, good evening from Brooklyn, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Catherine and Elizabeth, and everyone at Catamaran. I'm delighted to be here. This is Zone by the French poet Guillaume Apollinaire. It's rather long, so it's been abridged, still long. And if you're following along, you'll notice that there are some changes from the printed version because that's what translators do. Zone. In the end, you are tired of this old-fashioned world. Shepherdess Eiffel Tower, on the bridges your flocks stall and bleat. This morning you're sick of the Romans and Greeks. Even the autos here look obsolete. Only religion is fresh. Religion is new like the hangars at Port Aviation. In Europe, only you are not antique, Christianity. The most modern European is you, Pope Pius X. As for yourself, windows watch, and the shame you hold in stops you going to church and confessing your sins. You read handouts, brochures, posters that blare their views. So much for poetry. And for prose, there's the news. The tabloids are rife with detective stories, profiles of great men, and assorted other glories. Here is the young street, and you're still a child. Your mother dresses you only in blue and white. You are very pious, and with René Dali as your oldest crony, nothing delights you like church ceremony. 9 o'clock, the gaslight low and blue, you creep from the dormitory. All night you pray in the school oratory, while forever the flamboyant glory of Christ spins an eternal and splendid deep amethyst. He is the handsome lily we all cultivate. He is the red-headed torch the wind can't suffocate. He is the pale ruby sun of the dolorous mater. He is the ever-verdant tree of every prayer. He is the dual gibbet of honor and eternity. He is the six-pointed star. He is God, who died on Friday and was resurrected Sunday. He is Christ, who rises skyward better than the pilots of aviation. He holds the world record for elevation. Pupil Christ of the eye, 20th pupil of the centuries, he's got the flair. And changed into a bird this century like Jesus lifts in the air. The devils in their pit stare up and say they see a copycat of Simon Magus in Judea. They shout, if he can fly, he must be flighty. Around the pretty airmen, the angels bob and flit. Icarus, Enoch, Elijah, Apollonius of Tyana hover around the first airplane, making way now and then for those carried by the Eucharist, those priests who rise, eternally raising the host. The airplane alights without folding its wings. With millions of swallows the sky then rings. Winging swiftly come crows, falcons, owls, from Africa ibises, flamingos, and marabous. The rock, celebrated by poets and storytellers, clutches Adam's skull, the original head, as it hovers. The eagle springs forth with a mighty shriek, and the small hummingbird comes from America. From China come Jian birds, long and supple, who have but one wing and fly in couples. And now here's the dove, immaculate spirit, flanked by the lyrebird and the eye-spotted peacock. The phoenix of pyre that self-engenders briefly masks the scene with its blazing embers. And all of them, eagle, phoenix, and Jian, fraternize with the flying machine up there in the skies. Now you walk around Paris, alone in the throng. Near you herds of lowing buses grind along, your throat constricted with a lover's pain as if you could never be loved again. If you lived in olden days, you join a monastery. You're ashamed when you catch yourself reciting a prayer. You mock yourself, your laugh flickers like hellfire. These sparks of laughter gild the backdrop of your life, like a painting that hangs in a dark gallery, and that sometimes you move in closer to see. Here you are in Marseille, amid the watermelons. Here you are in Koblenz, at the giant hotel. Here you are in Rome, beneath the Japanese plum. Here you are in Amsterdam, with a girl you find pretty, but who's plain. She's engaged to be married to a student from Leiden. They rent out rooms in Latin, cubicula locanda. I recall spending 3 days there, and 3 more in Buda. You are in Paris, standing before the magistrate. They toss you in jail like a common reprobate. You have had travels both somber and gay, before you could see through deception and age. At 20 and 30, your loves have been cruel. I've squandered my life and behaved like a fool. You dare not look at your hands, and I sob all the time, for yourself, for the one I love, for every suffered crime. You are standing at the bar of a seedy cafe, drinking cheap coffee among the indigent. At night you dine in a fine establishment. These women aren't wicked, but they've got their woes. All, even the ugliest, have brought their lovers low. You are alone. Morning's on its way. Milkmen rattle their cans in the alleyways. Night slips off like a comely mestiza, false-hearted Ferdine, or vigilant Lisa. And you drink down that liquor that burns like your life that you down like an elixir of life. You walk to Otaï, go home a pedestrian, to sleep among your figurines oceanic and Guinean. These are Christs of other forms, other creeds, the lesser Christs of obscure hopes and deeds. Farewell, farewell, sun sundered. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for reading that. And I think you'd been working on that all summer. It's just such a pleasure to hear you read it. And I was just thinking what Apollinaire would think of being with us during these times and in this virtual reading here, the way we're doing it, so that people from all over the world could actually hear his writing. So lovely translation of Zone. And let's see, our next reader is Maria Kochis. Welcome, Maria.
Hi. Thanks.
Maria Kochis was awarded the Arkansas International Emerging Writers Prize for Fiction in 2018. She has an MA in English from the University of California, Davis. Please welcome Maria Kochis.
Thanks. So this is an excerpt from my short story. When Dan and I got back to the house, it was early morning. Dawnlight was spilling all over the table, reminding me of one of Vermeer's kitchen scenes. Messy, raw, but also holy. The wine in our glasses was very red. Chairs were pushed back, and the molten wax of the candle had run down their sides and gobbed along their holders. The air in the kitchen was thick with scent, the sour scent of the wine and the garlicky, earthy scent of the goulash. Dan had coffee and then left for the vines. It was that critical time of year, just before the harvest. I knew that he would spend hours measuring sugars and acids with his refractometer, trying to determine if the grapes were fully ripe, and that when he came home that evening, his fingers and thumb would be stained deeply purple, and so would his tongue. Dan and I had 20 hilly acres, almost all of which are given to grapes. We were able to buy the property with some money an aunt in Florida had left him. Our neighbors to the left and right also grow grapes, but behind us, Howell Mountain rises steeply. There are only woods. After I cleaned up the kitchen, I put on my boots and hiked 2 miles up a twisted, rooty trail to my secret place, a meadow golden with grasses, fringed with Doug firs. Only one tree grows inside the perimeter of the meadow, an enormous coast live oak. At the base of this oak was a mattress, which used to grace our bedroom. No sheet, a pattern of red and white stripes. The mattress wouldn't last the winter. The corners were black with mold. Mice had been eating it out from the inside. In November, I planned to haul it back down the trail in my wheelbarrow, take it to the dump. In the old days, if I had shown Dan a mattress in the meadow, no matter how mouse infested, he'd have had my clothes off in no time. Here, in Napa, sex was never that playful, or even that frequent. What Dan seemed to like instead was a smoldering fire, letting things build. Days of looking, even touching, and then backing off. I still missed our old tussles, that puppy love of yore, but it was also true that the sex that had evolved between us was a lot more erotic, a pleasure I was always keening for. The meadow and the woods around it, 40 acres, belonged to Mr. Hatchett's, who doesn't live on Howell Mountain anymore, but still shows up from time to time. He is supposedly a great birder and lover of oaks. His neighbors have begged him to sell his land for years, and he won't, not for love or money. The coyote comes here too, or used to. I knew it was the same animal because most coyotes aren't that big. It was also a great thief and mischief maker. Once, when I was lying on the mattress in a spot of shifting sun, the coyote slunk by with a fat Rhode Island red in its mouth. The hen was still alive and uncharacteristically quiet, full of surprise at being carried. Perhaps a warning light had gone off in its tiny chicken brain, instructing it not to make a sound. The coyote was close enough for me to see its pupils, the quivering whiskers of its nose. Another time, Dan and I were headed to a neighbor's barbecue when the coyote came trotting down the weedy shoulder of the driveway carrying a raw steak. Dan and I had a good laugh at that. The old trickster, he had said, not without affection. I've always loved coyotes, the wiliest and most adaptable of predators. When the coyote disappeared last spring, I felt bereft. Who would show me how to steal from my neighbors now, to smile in secret? Who would teach me how to survive this hyper-controlled landscape and still keep my wild soul intact? That's it.
Thank you, Maria. I hope people will be able to read the rest of your story in the new issue. I also enjoyed how someone who's here in the audience, Katya Bisons, wrote, "So real and human to have sirens and children in the world," with a poet. So here we go. We're welcoming John Whalen. Hi, John.
Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
Good. John Whalen is the author of Caliban, published by Lost Horse Press in 2002. In Honor of the Spigot was published in 2010 and won the Gribble Press Chapbook Award. Whalen's newest book, Above the Pear Trees, was the winner of the 2014 Floating Bridge Chapbook Award. His manuscript, The Johnson Poems Heart Attack Geological Survey, was a finalist for the 2020 Catamaran Poetry Prize. Please welcome John Whalen.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Catherine. It's an honor to be here. I'm excited and happy to be part of the magazine. This first poem is about grief over a failed relationship called Inside a Tree. Sunlight leans you toward a pretty pine with translucent needles, a flurry of wind. Yet she never intends an ocean voyage, owns property in the middle of summer. If you live inside a tree, then sunlight's the thing. A history in one place, though there are other places. Inside your tree, underside of the moon chewed off. Inside your tree, a sideways walking coyote. If you live inside a tree, coyote dreams. If you live inside a tree all winter in Washington State and go home to Australia in May, it's winter again. You never have summer all the years you are a tree. The second poem is self-explanatory with the title. Excuse me for moving around so much. Poem on the first anniversary of Mother's death for my 7 brothers and sisters. The truck our father left us tilted in sections into the backyard, each season deeper. A year after Mom died, we employed bungee cords and the silver magic of duct tape to mount the biggest pieces of the trucks on tires, then lifted the hood and power hosed the insides. Spider webs, squirrels' nests, baby mice. The motor started right up. First time ever, and we drove all night looking for Mom. Whenever we got into a little town, we covered our eyes so we couldn't see the name of the town or of the closed up shops. And we drove all night into the mountains. And we drove all night looking for Mom. For supplies, we had donuts, some dry bacon, and a couple cartons of orange juice. We stopped only for gas and bathrooms. Somewhere in Montana, we ran out of food and started fasting. There were those of us who wanted to stop for more food, some who wanted to stop for sleep. But we drove all night and we drove all day. A desperado kind of light embraced us held us, and it was easy to see who was who, older brother's plans, younger sister's wisdom, older sister at the wheel. We drove all night through mountains and forests, along sheer cliffs, and we never looked back or stopped saying prayers or braked for forest fires. The river towns were filled with rafts, canoes, kayaks. We tumbled out of the truck in Riggins, Idaho, shook the pins and needles from our legs, ate breakfast the rest of the morning. A middle brother, one of those good with humor and beer and whiskey, arranged a rafting trip into the interior cliffs of the Salmon River. We shot into the rapids, all hanging on the best we could. The youngest brother shouted the loudest. I got the wettest. Others took pictures that caught the sky's raw cerulean edge. Rough waters dislodged us from the raft, and we flew above the flood. All that we lost, wallets, keys, sunglasses, our own dear names, that was nothing. Some brothers, some sisters said they heard Mom. She wasn't sad, they reported, but happy. All of us, our hair got soaked. Many felt the spray of the water like a blessing upon their cheeks. Many saw the sun for the first time ever, really saw into the shining of it. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, John. That was wonderful. All right. We are not sure if Allison Luderman is here, but she might be joining us. Meanwhile, we are going to present now Simon Barker, who's joining us all the way from Australia. Simon Barker lives in Australia, and his stories have been published in the UK, North America, Turkey, Indonesia, Australia, and the Indian subcontinent. So please welcome all the way from Australia, Simon Barker.
Thank you, Catherine. Here goes the Australian accent. My story is called Elf King's Daughter. Just bear in mind that the narrator is a 12-year-old boy. A while after I'd started high school, we visited the Fox's house. Mr. Fox was an old friend of Dad's from overseas. He and Dad arrived in Australia by the same taxi. That was before my sister and I were born. It was before Dad and Mum got married. Dad was working in London at an aluminium company. Writing that long word aluminium every day was wearing him out. He sailed to England on a ship after the war. Dad was the sailor who peeled the spuds. He peeled them all the way across the equator from Sydney and grew a goatee. But when he wanted to go home, there were no ships. They were all packed with migrants, and it was too expensive to fly. Flying was out of the question. Dad knew some other people, so they said, "We'll take a taxi." They bought an old London one and headed off. When they struck India, they became lost or had no map or something. So they loaded the taxi on a boat because there were boats from India. And then they drove from Perth. It was in the newspapers. In the taxi was Mr. Fuchs. He was born in Vienna, but he was returning to Australia because he'd fled here before the war. His parents were Jewish, and they had to escape the Nazis, or they would have put them in extermination camp. So they switched their name to Fox and became refugees. In Australia, they ordered him into a camp anyway, because they are drongos, Dad said, blinded by prejudice. When the war blew up, those drongos said, "All right, you can go back to England and be in the army." Mr. Fox was old enough by then, but he wasn't allowed to shoot because he spoke German. He could still be in the English army, even without a gun. After the surrender, he wanted to come to Australia again because he liked it here, and the lady he'd married in London was German. She wasn't Jewish, she was from Berlin. When the Russians invaded, she hid up a chimney full of soot. She was skinny because food had become short. If she didn't hide, the Russian soldiers would have raped her repeatedly because Stalin ordered 10 days of raping against the Germans as a punishment for being Nazis. Some others squeezed in a taxi from London, about 5 or 6 of them, and they were Dad's friends too. Back in Sydney, Mr. Fox was an architect, and his hair grew long like Einstein. He spoke with an accent, but he sounded very posh, and his wife sounded even posher. She drank cocktails and smoked Benson and Hedges. She used to dance in a ballet. She wanted to settle in America, but Mr. Fox decided, no, Australia is best for us. Recall what Sigmund Freud said after visiting America. America is a big mistake. Yes, Mrs. Fox told him, that Sigmund was another one of your Viennese. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Simon. That was great. Well, I think that concludes our reading.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. There's so many people here. I wish we could see you all and have a glass of wine and now have a little reception and party to celebrate. But I just think it's special we can bring all your words into our, homes this way.
Yeah, Simon could not have been here otherwise. Nor Mark.
That's right.
Probably several of you could not have been here.
Simon might have flown to California. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just so wonderful to hear all these voices. And so, thank you everyone for coming. You can buy the issue. It's here on that little link. So you can have it. You can have everyone's words in your home and enjoy all of the poets and writers in this magazine, many of whom weren't able to make it tonight. But thank you all. And thank you everyone who read tonight. It was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully